The United States' largest labor union, the AFL-CIO, just released their annual Executive Paywatch report with 2022 data. While the report does deliver some good news for the common man that CEO pay has fallen 9% from 2021, the numbers are unsurprising if not depressing as we see the average gap between Fortune 500 CEOs and their median workers remains at a staggering 272-to-1 ratio. Assuming a 43-year working career, this means that the median worker would have to work over 6 full lifetimes to earn what their CEO does in a single year. Ouch. Today we're going to talk about some of the latest research on CEO to worker pay and why it matters. The Paywatch report notes that Fortune 500 CEO pay averaged $16.7 million for 2022. This is a 9% decrease from an all-time high in 2021 of $18.3 million. This is most likely due to restricted stock awards that were down with the stock market in 2022. However, it's fair to note that the S&P 500 was down 18% for the year in 2022, while CEO pay was down only 9%. They often pride themselves on their stock performance, but that seems to have a more prominent upside skewed bias in this case. And when things don't go their way, well, they aren't penalized too harshly for it. Despite the decrease in pay this past year, CEOs are not starving. Over the last decade, CEO compensation is up $5 million, or a 43% increase. Looking at a report put out by the Economic Policy Institute in 2021, they found some troubling results showing the growing wage gaps between CEOs and regular workers. Looking at a longer-term lens, the EPI found that CEO pay grew by a massive 1,322% between 1978 and 2020. That growth is contrasted by an 18% growth in pay for all workers in that same time frame. When compared to the top 0.1%, CEOs outperform that group significantly, 341% versus the 1,322%, and CEO pay growth even outperformed the S&P stock market's growth rate of 817% during that same time frame. A large portion of a CEO's pay package is structured around stock options or awards. In recent years, companies have been granting CEOs more vesting stock awards and trending away from stock options. The Economic Policy Institute notes the basic logic around this. With stock options, CEOs can only make gains. They realize a gain if the stock price rises beyond the price of the initial options granted to them, and they lose nothing if the stock price falls. The fact that they have nothing to lose but potentially a lot to gain means that they can take excessive risks in the company to try and bump up the stock price. Stock awards, on the other hand, promote a better alignment of the CEO's goals with the shareholders' goals, and those awards often have a lengthier vesting period, say 3 to 5 years, so the CEO has an interest in lifting the firm's stock price over a longer period and being mindful to avoid any sort of downturns in the stock price to maintain the value of their compensation package. To me, this logic does make sense on a basic level, and I think that aligning the incentives is a good idea, and I'm happy it's a trend we are seeing, even if it's providing insane excess value to a single individual that probably doesn't need it. If you are enjoying this video, then you can compensate me by hitting that like button and consider subscribing for more economic and business content in the future. The Economic Policy Institute's report notes that this excess pay to CEOs cannot be attributed completely to the CEO's talent or skills. They note that many analysts have suggested that the rise in CEO compensation has largely been driven by the demand for the skills and talents for these CEOs and other highly paid professionals. But their logic largely hinges on the fact that we've seen substantial wage growth for the other 0.1% top earners within the same time frame. But as the EPI notes, there's a significant gap between the increases for CEOs and the top 0.1% earners. It's worth mentioning that the 0.1% group includes the CEOs in it, so without them, the gap would be even wider. In 2019, CEO compensation was 6.4 times the pay of the top 0.1% wage earners, a ratio that has just about doubled since 1979 and even increased by a substantial amount since 2009 alone. So CEOs have done fantastic relative to even the top 0.1% group, and keep in mind the top 0.1% have done very well in that time frame too. So if this excessive gap remains, then talent and skill cannot explain it alone. The EPI argues that if CEO pay is growing far faster than that of higher other earners, then this must be evidence of economic rents. Investopedia tells us that economic rent is an amount of money earned that exceeds that which is economically or socially necessary. Market imperfections thus lead to the rise of economic rent. It would not exist if markets were perfect, since competitive pressures would drive down prices. This means that if CEOs were paid less, then there would be no loss of productivity or output in the economy. So why are CEOs able to command these economic rents? Well, the EPI argues that CEOs' ability to gain high compensation comes from their ability to establish unequal bargaining power. Keep in mind that many of these companies have a board of directors. Many of these directors are or were former C-suite executives themselves. It creates this exclusive club where they pat each other's back and recommend large compensation packages for one of their own. A lot of research has been done using social network analysis to show how interconnected these boards can be for these top publicly traded companies. Research has found that companies with highly connected boards of directors result in lower corporate governance that leads to CEOs being paid more and CEOs being less likely to be dismissed for underperformance. In essence, it feels like a big social club for the wealthy elite. So why does all this matter? Why does CEO pay matter? Well, runaway CEO pay is a major contributor to rising inequality that we could safely do away with. CEOs are getting more because of their power to set pay and because so much of their pay is stock related, not because they are increasing their productivity or possess specific high demand skills. This escalation of CEO compensation and of executive compensation more generally has fueled growth of the top 1% and top 0.1% incomes, leaving less of the fruits of economic growth for ordinary workers and widening the gap between high earners and the bottom 90%. The economy would suffer no harm if CEOs were paid less or taxed more. Economic power is massively influential, and through these economic resources the wealthy elite have amassed, they are able to fund politicians, charities, research, initiatives, marketing, and propaganda that set the agenda to benefit them and keep themselves wealthy. The growing wealth disparity results only in more power for them and less policies and programs that benefit the working class and greater society. Is there anything that can be done to curtail rising executive compensation? Well, researchers have identified several policy options that we could look at. Implementing higher marginal income tax rates at the very top would limit rent-seeking behavior and reduce the incentives for executives to push for such higher pay. Another option is to set corporate tax rates higher for firms that have higher ratios of CEO to worker compensation. Stephen Clifford recommends setting a cap on compensation and taxing companies on any amount over the cap, similar to the way the baseball luxury tax has implemented on baseball team payrolls that are exceeding the salary cap. Changes to corporate governance can be used to control compensation as well, such as a greater use of say on pay, which allows a firm's shareholders to vote on top executives' compensation. I think in the long run, a lot of people are very dodgy around raising tax rates, even if it's for the wealthy elite, so that is kind of a non-starter or a hard conversation to get rolling. The governance route might be more promising if there is a greater use of say on pay and the actual shareholders use their votes to curtail top executive compensation. But my guess is we won't be seeing fewer yachts in the Mediterranean anytime soon. If you've enjoyed this video on executive pay, then consider checking out the video on the screen now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.